You're listening to the Get Out and Drive podcast, fueled by AMD, with your hosts, John, Custom Car Nerd Meyer, and Jason, Old Car Guy Car. We'll be bringing you gearheads everything you never wanted to know about cars and why they should be on the road and not in your garage. Are you ready to get out and drive?
Welcome back to the Get Out and Drive podcast, fueled by AMD. I am John, Custom Car Nerd Meyer.
And I'm Jason, Old Car Guy Car.
So, Jason, what are you up to lately? I know it's been a minute since we've recorded. We've had some celebrity deaths. We've had some things come up. We've had some bills or laws that may get passed and things. What kind of stuff's going on in your neighborhood?
One of the biggest notable things in the car industry or the car genre is the death of the great Gene Winfield. We've talked about him. We've done episodes talking about that type of car hobby where, you take anything and you just make it wacky and one of a kind. We rate him right up there with George Barris and the Barris brothers. And Gene, well, he's been to Canada in my neck of the woods in New Brunswick many, many times for the Atlantic Nationals, which takes place in July every year here. That's where I first met him.
Mm-hmm.
I never, ever expected for him to remember anybody that he met on a single basis, just simply because he meets a lot of people, and a man of, I believe, 97.
He was pretty far up there.
Yeah. So to be around for a century, to see almost every car that likely was ever made in your life. Gene Winfield, the late great Gene Winfield now.
Yeah, he will be a big loss for the automotive industry completely. Right up there with all of our What Drives Youth initiative. He was very, very much into passing the torch, very much into making sure the next generation was welcomed and people got his knowledge. That worked out really well. He did a lot of on-site. He traveled the world for a while. He did a lot of on-site customizing, chopping, in-person type stuff. And it was incredible. And he always had people that were teens to 20s to 30s involved hands-on with a lot of his projects.
Yeah, and us being in our soon-to-be, for me, 50s, we're at the age where we remembered Gene for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And our parents, if they were into that, into the cars and stuff like that, they will remember Gene, and maybe even our grandparents will remember the name, to know that this is what he did. Now, not everybody liked that type of customization that he may have done, but being a part of the What Drives Youth, he's been around teaching, showing what he did, showing everything, whether you are of the Ring Brothers caliber of car customization, or whether you are of the Bad Chad. Everybody learns from somebody. And I think a lot of these things go back to the Gene Winfields, the Barris brothers of this industry. And knowing that he laid his mark in this industry, we will be able to see his work for many years to come, not just from him, but from the people who aspire to be like him.
Yeah, Gene didn't slow down at all until he was physically not capable, which was the past year. He was going all over the place, and he was still painting cars and working on things. A friend of mine, Carly Brogan, she was one of the last people to have a full, complete Winfield fade done on her Lincoln Zephyr. He did a kind of a refurb on her car, and it turned out wonderful. And that's a big deal to have one of his cars painted. He was most known for that Winfield fade. She was one of the last people to really stay with him.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of people who have tried to duplicate the work that he's done. Some do it very well, and some not so well, maybe. But when everything's all said and done, as a passionate person who enjoys cars of all creations, whether they are rat rods, which tend to be a more modern era of customization, whether they tend to be street rods, whether they are resto mod, again, a more modern term, or we go back to some of the things that John's posted on his Instagram about hot rods and what does and does not constitute as a hot rod. If you're not following Get Out and Drive podcast, Fueled by AMD, on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, or wherever, make sure you are, because we are always posting these neat little things about certain things that we may be talking about in future episodes, and that was one of them, is the whole hot rod deal, where people think that my 1979 Chevy El Camino is a hot rod. Well, no, technically it's not. It may be a hot rod to you, but in the classical sense of the term. We tend to do that. In fact, when John posted it, I typed in the comments, I wonder what motor's in that. And I know John's hair just curled on the top of his head when I said that. So
What's left of it?
what's left?
Now, Jason, you've seen RoboCop, right? The
I
movie?
have.
You
Yeah,
have. Do you know that Gene Winfield built most of the vehicles in that? He built a lot of vehicles from RoboCop. Um, you've seen Back to the Future.
for sure.
Gene built a lot of the background cars for Back to the Future.
Really?
Yeah, in RoboCop, the 2000, I think it's called 2000 SUX, that still was sitting in his Mojave body shop, sitting outside for a really long time. There was a lot of vehicles that were built for RoboCop, and vehicles that were built that were non-moving cars, background cars for Back to the Future, and those were still sitting. They still exist, and they were still sitting in his back lot.
Speed over to our friends at racingjunk.com and place your free classified ad on the world's #1 racing and performance marketplace.
The Get Out and Drive podcast is always looking to support the next generation in the auto industry and hobby through our What Drives Youth initiative.
Our friends at AMD know that younger enthusiasts are out there building vintage cars and trucks while incorporating modern comforts. AMD Restoration Parts maintain that classic look needed for resto-mod builds.
If you are a younger enthusiast working on a build using AMD parts, we want to hear from you. If chosen, you and your build will be featured in an upcoming What Drives Youth segment on the Get Out and Drive podcast. Visit getoutandrive.com to let us know about your build, or tag us in your build posts on social media. Visit autometaldirect.com and use the code GOND for a 10% discount exclusively for our listeners for a limited time. AMD, built for enthusiasts by enthusiasts.
Get out and drive in 2025. Are you ready to get out and drive in 2025?
That's really interesting, and it really kind of ties into the next celebrity topic of what's big in the news these days, and it's another Gene Hackman, who, again, if you guys have just if you haven't heard that Gene Hackman has died, get out from underneath the rock you were under, because it's happened. And in a strange series of events that led to him, his wife, and one of his dogs dying, all within just a few days or a week of each other, ended up not being suspicious at all, more uncanny and just coincidental that things happen the way that they did. Without getting into details, John, like, Gene Hackman, at, what was he, 94 years old, I believe?
I believe he was 94.
Yeah, so with everybody who is sitting here right now in this screen can attest to the fact that Gene Hackman's been an old person for as long as we likely can remember.
Forever.
Forever,
And
right?
he was old to me when he was Lex Luthor in Superman.
Yeah, and people don't realize that he's where he is um, in history, that you haven't heard from him likely in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But 50 years ago,
Oh yeah,
he was a big deal.
he was a big deal.
What's the first movie you remember seeing him in?
I know Gene Hackman. The first one I saw him in, character Popeye Doyle. He was a hard-hitting, gritty policeman in The French Connection from 1971, and he won an Oscar for that. Was a
His
big
first,
his
according to
first
Paul,
Oscar.
that was his first Oscar.
Yes, it was a big deal, and the big deal that I think about that movie is the car chase, because it comes off of the heels of Bullet, and I don't know exactly for sure, but I think some of the people that had things to do with Bullet and the car chase and all the production people and things, I think they had a lot to do with the French Connection as well. It's filmed the same way. It kind of has the same feel and look. And if you haven't seen the French Connection, you haven't seen Gene Hackman driving a brown Le Mans like a freaking nut underneath the L train, because he's trying to catch somebody that's up on an L train, and he's driving and he's looking. He ain't watching where he's going. He's looking up at this L train. He's trying to catch the bad guy, and shopping carts, people, stuff, everything gets in his way. It is an amazing, amazing scene.
So I think that Paul has a clip of one of these scenes of him racing through the city. And pay attention to the car that pulls out and Gene hits. That was by accident.
The chase sequence was, you read something like that in the script and it's not really that detailed. That's all direction. That's all somebody's real idea of the way to make a film really move. You can't put that down on paper. Yeah, the car sequence was interesting because we worked on it a long time, 2 weeks or something like that. And it all cut back and forth between the elevated train up above and what was going on down below on the street. And I tore up a couple of cars. They had the street closed off. They had, police all over the place, closing all the streets coming in, and for about 4 or 5 blocks, so we could really get a run. And we were going, I don't know, 70, 75 mile an hour, probably, maybe more. But what they hadn't figured is that the cars that were parked along the street belonged to people in the houses, and they were going off to work. So in the midst of one of these long, really hell for leather runs, suddenly out of the corner of my eye, I see a guy pulling in front of me. And bam, we hit like that and drove me into the steel upright of the elevated trains and washed the car out.
And he just kept going, John.
He did.
He hit that post.
He did. He kept going. And that's a big important thing. Is I know now with CGI and all that stuff and all the fake crap that Hollywood's tried to feed us recently with, I don't watch any of the newer movies with cars and stuff. It just drives me crazy. Any of the Fast and Furious stuff where you try and jump a 69 or 70 Charger and go to the moon, or I don't even know where, or try and jump a CGI Mustang over the top of a bridge in the new Gone in 60 Seconds. That's terrible. Gene Hackman did almost all of the stunts in this movie. He's even credited as a stuntman in this movie. And the fact that they smashed into someone's car, that they had no idea who it was, and they kept that crap in the movie, totally different time. Totally different time of the Hollywood movie making career.
And I said
It's
before we started
ridiculous.
recording that I bet the production company bought that guy a new car in exchange for being able to keep that
Oh, to
in
keep that in the
the
thing.
theme.
Oh my God, the just to be able to say that you were somebody that pulled out in front of Gene Hackman accidentally, and it stayed in the film.
Yeah. And
Just absolutely amazing.
I think that you can always you can take any actor at some point in their career and you can tie them into the automotive industry somehow. You know, this might have been what did it for for Gene Hackman back in what year was that? 71.
71.
So if we go through, and I'm just holding up, a list of some of the movies that he's noted for. Um, take my glasses off to do this. Is you know after that we've got movies like The Gypsy Moths in 1969. We scroll through to the Poseidon Adventure, the original one. There was one that was made in the 2000s as well. Young Frankenstein. We move into the Superman trilogy. I guess it wasn't trilogies. They did make a fourth one, I
They
believe.
did.
We go Hoosiers and Mississippi Burning. What a classic movie that was, Mississippi Burning. And then we get into some of the more modern stuff into the 90s, Crimson Tide and The Birdcage, Ants. Like, we just go through some of that stuff and people don't even realize that, Gene was bigger than he actually was. Not only was he big in the movies, he was a big guy. He was a tall fella. So the loss of Gene Hackman, not just as a person, but he was a family man. He was an actor. He lived a life just like the rest of us do. And, to be accredited with such a long list of movies over his career, it will be a sad loss. Our condolences go out to the family of both him and his wife. But I think at the end of the day, we need to stop looking at people as celebrities and look at them as people. They belong to a family somewhere along the line, and it's no matter who it is a tragedy. Just like Gene Winfield, he had family, so we don't want to make light of the situation when somebody dies, but at the end of the day, their name was out there for a reason. It was because they knew how to do something, and they did it well.
Yep.
So, John, another thing I want to lead into a little bit, seeing how we're talking about what's in the news, is we go back, I think it was last fall or early winter.
Okay.
California stated that they were not going to allow new 2025 RVs that ran diesel engines. They were not going to allow them to be sold in California. And as a follow-up to that, we are looking at now, Jay Leno is jumping on board with a law in California that is going to, hopefully, if passed, allow exemptions for classic cars when it comes to emissions tests. So if your car is insured as a classic and you're only putting X number of miles a year, like it's less than 5,000, then yeah, you should be exempt. So where are the exemptions for these big diesel pusher RVs that they're not putting 70, 80,000 kilometers a year on, at least not in one state likely, right? They're going out, they're parking, they're sitting for weeks on end in the sun. Of course, California's got a lot of that. Why do classic cars rate higher than RVs, especially new ones? And why are we letting these rules? It's California, sure. If you're from California, I'm sorry, but that's BS.
Oh, I think it's a bunch of bunk. I cannot remember the last time I was driving in regular traffic and I saw a 1978 to 1990 vehicle. I mean, you just don't see them.
They're few and far
Everybody's
between.
vision of classic cars is different. We're getting older. Everybody's classic cars are getting different. I threw up in my mouth a little bit. I was looking at Reddit the other day, and I was on the classic car page. Super cool, right? Somebody said, I got a new classic car. So I clicked on it. It was an 84 Caravan. They had it parked in the middle of all sorts of woods, and it was all cute little pictures, and it was all sort of neat and everything. And I beat myself in the head several times, and I said, oh, that's a classic car.
You know those memes that you see on Instagram, Facebook, and all those places where it shows a picture of two vehicles? It's like, this is the truck. This is a 30-year-old truck in my head,
Right.
and this is a 30-year-old truck in reality. And
Mhm.
like the 30-year-old truck in your head is a square body,
Sure.
right? But the 30-year-old truck in your head is an OBS Ford
Right.
or something like that. Like, it's just our minds take us back to when we were younger of what we thought 20 or a 30-year-old vehicle was, of what was considered classic. And correct me if I'm wrong, classic cars, is it 25 for classic and 50 for antique?
There's no difference where I live.
Okay.
In Illinois, Missouri, they consider 25 years and older from current register date
So
as availability for classic plates in Illinois. I
so
think most of the states are like that as well, but I can't say for sure.
I'm not a smart man and my math isn't that great. But this is 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And if we take 25 years off that, that means
Mm-hmm.
anything built 2000
Yep.
and older
Yep.
is a classic car, or in your case, an antique.
Yes. We saw a really nice OBS truck today. It was maroon, long bed. Joanne and I were driving. And I said, I felt terrible. I said, oh man, that truck looks pretty clean. She saw some guy hanging out driving it, and she looked, she said, hey, that's got antique plates on it. And we all had a good laugh.
Well, there you go. See, now your 98 Jeep Cherokee yours is an 89.
Mine's an 89.
Oh, shoot, I'm way off there. I can't even use that as an example.
Nope.
But my soul.
My brother-in-law, Richard, he just bought today, he bought a 2006 Jeep Grand Cherokee, which I don't think of as an old car. That's a 20-year-old car. Working on it.
Crazy. Craziness.
We looked at the build date of it. It's working on a 20-year-old car. And I don't know. I don't know where the time goes.
Well, I can see a little bit of it in my beard here.
A little bit.
Every Fiero ever made could have vintage plates on it.
Yes.
Shut up, Paul. That doesn't help the situation. We're getting a little bit off track. We're talking about classic cars and exemptions and where that exemption should be. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, when fuel injection and catalytic converters first started becoming a thing, catalytic converters in the 70s, fuel injection in the 80s, that was when they were really trying to dial in the efficiency and the lack of polluting, if you want to call it, on modern vehicles. So is that where we should be drawing that line? Or should there be a line? If your car originally came with a catalytic converter, that puts us clear back into the mid-70s for a lot
Well,
of
that's
vehicles.
where I was headed to talk about is California still has 1978 and newer must pass smog.
Yeah, which is ridiculous because the criteria for a vehicle to meet smog emissions in 1978
Mm-hmm.
are probably 100-fold different
Mm-hmm.
today.
But they still want a visual catalytic converter. They have a sniff test and a visual test. You have to have a smog pump, which is blows air. You have to have the air pump. You have to have a catalytic converter.
Yeah,
You have to have single exhaust. I saw a van the other day, and it was for sale on Marketplace, and it was on some board for street machinery stuff for sale. And somebody said, "Hey, how much is this?" Somebody said, and they said, "Is it a 78?" Yeah, it's a 78. Will it pass CARB, California Air Resource Bureau? I think that's CARB. Anyway, but they said no, it's had dual exhaust put on it. It won't pass smog.
And what makes that? So, yeah, right now we're specifically talking about California, but where that problem lies is that other states take on the rules that California sets. And again, we're not a part of this podcast to be political or take political stances, but we all know the generalities that are associated with California. That falls into all other states that may or may not vote the same way as California does.
They may be a different color.
For example, I live right next door to Maine. Maine is on the complete opposite side of the country of California. The population of Maine could fit on a pinprick in downtown Los Angeles, but yet Maine adopts California emissions standards. Like, why? And so why is that? Well, it's because the climate activists and the this and the that. The big picture is, yes, I completely understand why you want to do that. But the smaller picture is, look at the number of these cars that we're talking about based on the number of cars you have in your state and how many miles. Like, people are going, like, Arnold Schwarzenegger can go drive his Hummer up and down the Pacific Coast Highway, yet, and he can put 60,000 miles a year on if he wants to. But yet you and I can't go out and drive our pre-1978 whatever. I couldn't drive Dale the truck down the Pacific Coast Highway if I lived there.
Right.
Because it
in its current form.
Not in its current form, especially. So I just find that we need to take a broader look at, what are we talking about here? How many miles are you putting on? If you don't think they should be driving 5,000 miles a year on, maybe restrict it a little bit further. But nevertheless, it leaves me in a position where I would not be able to, in California, where the weather is almost always beautiful, to daily drive my classic vehicle.
Which is odd, because that's like the mecca of custom culture.
Yeah.
And that a lot of car culture started in Los Angeles and surrounding. I'm guessing because of the weather.
They call it SoCal for a reason.
Yeah, there's a reason, but they are the most strict on everything. You listen to people that bought or that won brand new cars on The Price is Right. They'd have power door locks, power steering, air conditioning, and California emissions. And that was another extra $100 or whatever it was. But they had to tell you that that's what it was.
Well, and again, the whole point comes down to, if I want to buy myself a brand new $500,000, whatever they are, Winnebago diesel, whatever, I in California, if I was living there, I can't go do that in 2025,
right,
as of right now. But again, we got to look at how much this is affecting. California has the most cars of any state. California probably has more cars than all of Canada. And I get why they have such stringent emissions controls. The word smog was invented in California. And they've got too many cars. They've got too many roads. I get it. But in the grand scheme of things, we go back to the, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Hummer. Like that thing, even though it passes emissions, probably puts out more emissions than the 1,500 to 2,000 miles a year I may drive in my classic car. But yet I'm the one that gets penalized. That's the whole point, folks, is we need to be taking a look at the realistic numbers of, where is this, how is this calculated? And Jay Leno being a huge advocate for custom cars, keeping cars in their original form, even having some race cars that he drives, keeping the hobby alive. Jay Leno is getting up there in age. He's not going to be around forever. There's going to be people like him that want to continue carrying that passion. And it seems as though California, which I might add, not only is it kind of the classic car hub of the world, it's also the aftermarket parts source mecca of America and the world. So all these big places that come, SEMA comes out of California in the form of working with manufacturers to make sure that the products that they make are 50 state legal. So we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars every year in this industry alone that comes out of California. Why are we not fighting harder? And I think that we are. I really do. I think we are fighting harder now for these exemptions to be able to allow more and more enthusiasts to enjoy what it is that we love to do. And that's simply with the windows rolled down, the wind in our hair, and cruising down the highway.
I know we've covered a whole lot of stuff in this episode. Some things that some of our newer listeners and younger listeners may not have been able to associate with things that they know. If you are not familiar with Gene Winfield, you're not familiar with Gene Hackman, or any of the things that they've done, we'll put some information down in our notes. Go check these people out. They are a big influence in the industry. And one of the things that keeps my passion alive.
And as we move on to further episodes, we'll be keeping you guys updated on a lot of the automotive related news that we feel is discussion worthy. So we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Are you ready to get out and drive in 2025? Get those cars on the road on October 5th, 2025 to celebrate National Get Out and Drive Day. Visit nationalgetoutanddriveday.com for more info. Cruise on over to our website, getoutanddrive.com, for all the info you never wanted to know about our podcast. Hit us up on our listener hotline, be the first to know what's happening, get industry news, and grab your Get Out and Drive merch. Connect with us on social media. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow us on X at Get Out and Drive Pod. Get out and drive in 2025.
What drives you? I was listening to two of the windmills. They were talking to each other the other day. One guy said, "I'm a huge music fan. What kind of music are you into?" He said, "I'm a huge metal fan."
Oh, look, it wouldn't be a good podcast unless we had a bad dad joke from Uncle John over here.
I'm a huge metal fan.
I get it. I get it.